Well, while we get ready, I'm assuming everybody in here. Good. All right, welcome. This is by far a bigger crowd than the 60 I saw signed up. And we even have a choir above. So this is, thank you. And one of which is a birthday boy. That's Chick. So this is outstanding, and thank you for taking time out on a lovely day. We want you to know, our first slide. To know that everyone here supports the new Tibbins facility. The question is where and how large. And we looked through a thoughtful process with meaningful input from all sections to come to a resolution of where, how big. It's our future. My name is Kaplan. I'm the head of the golf section. Again, thank you for coming. There will be questions that many of you have during the presentation. I'm going to ask you to hold them until the end. We'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. So I'd appreciate if you did hold that off. We have invited you here to discuss the tennis section's plan to build a $4.2 million facility in a piece of land that we call the cornfield, which was just up there. It's adjacent to the golf course, and it's the only possible place the golf course could ever grow. Tennis can pretty much go anywhere, but golf has this only one piece of property. What the tennis section has in mind is 10 new tennis courts, 2 pickleball courts, 2 paddle courts, 2-sided hitting area that would allow for 2 more pickle courts, a clubhouse with kitchenette, bathroom, showers, added viewing on there's going to be viewing from a roof deck. There'll be added viewing from the property. They're looking for parking for 60 cars and buses. The cost of this facility is 4.2 to 4.3 million. That's yet to be determined, but they have thoughtfully put together a budget. And it's going to be vetted by Land Tech, which is the company that did the survey of the wetlands and will follow up, I believe, with proposed plans for the development of the point. With this in mind, I'm going to pass the baton off to David Owen, who is going to talk to us about a brief history of the club. I did want you to see that, yes, golf is quiet. Tennis is loud, but pickleball is louder. David.
This is all my incompetence. I apologize for it. I didn't have Zoom on this laptop, so we couldn't share the screen. So if Ray will advance the slide there. I just want to give you a little history. The Washington Golf Club is actually older than the Washington Club. It's 14 years older. It was founded in 1889. It was just 1 year younger than the oldest golf club in the United States. It moved to its current location in about 1905. And the photo you see here was taken 20 or 25 years after that. If you play golf, you recognize this hole. It's number 6. You can see the fescue hole on the left and the green up there and the creek at the bottom. Just click the slide one more. This is the same hole today, and as you can see, it looks exactly the same. Mike Bowman took this photograph. The big difference between the hole in 1920 and now, and Ray, click it one more, is length. The back tee on 6 now is 150 yards, at least farther back from where the only tee was. And the 6 is not the only hole on the course that has been linked, and every hole on the course is longer than it was even when I joined 32 years ago. Even after all that lengthening, that our course is one of the shortest 9-hole courses in the country. In its 18-hole layout, it's actually 500 yards shorter than Lake Warmack Country Club. I'm almost 70 years old. Our course is not too short for me, but some of our younger members have never hit driver. Some barely hit 3-wood. When they want to drive the 9th green, they club down.
Come on, buddy, in the bathroom.
Next slide, right? A remarkable fact about our course is that all this lengthening has taken place within its original 40-acre footprint, which you see there. That's what it had in 1905, and that's what it has today. 40 acres is very small for a 9-hole course. Lake Warmack is 60 acres, or half again as big. The average course, if you built a 9-hole course today, would be almost 75 acres, which is not quite double, but almost. Every hole on our course has been lengthened to the extent that it can be within that footprint. The only way to make it longer is to move out. Next slide. In about 1960, a group of members led by an avid golfer donated 2 parcels of land to the club, totaling about 36 acres. The land is here, occupied by the driving range here, the cornfield here, and then in either direction on this side. It was about 20 years before they started on the driving range that was built in the 1980s. Back when I joined, to get your practice balls, you had to go to see Dave Johnson, a school teacher in the clubhouse. You got a little cloth bag of balls, and you took them up to the range. During the last 30 years, the range has been improved significantly, piece by piece. We have this wonderful short game practice area, elevated grass tees. It's terrific. We have members who never set foot on the course. They like to practice so much. The only problem with the range is the same one with the course. It's too short. But at the short side, it's only about 200 yards. It's longer this way, but we have, again, young members who can only hit irons on our course, on our range, because they can't get to the end. There is a way to move the next one to solve both the length problems on the range and the course. This is a recent version of a plan that's been discussed ever since I've been a member before, which has to do with extending the course into what's now the bottom of the range and moving the range back all the way to Saturday Lane. We could get the range over 300 yards, which is longer than all the few very young members can hit. And of course, that we would add to our 18-hole layout, we'd add 600 yards. This has been discussed for years. It's something that's always been pushed down the dream cabinet because we've had more pressing needs, but it's always been on the minds of golfers. Right now, we're not in a position financially. We have bigger needs, but it would be unfair, in my opinion, and short-sighted for the board to make any further improvements impossible by building tennis courts on the only land that the range of the course could extend into. And now to talk about the real topic, which is money. I've introduced Alan Levan, who is a member of the golf committee, the tennis relocation committee, and then also the finance committee.
Please ask
Oh.
to mute. I hope you're muted. I know, but don't say anything.
I want to start off by re-emphasizing a point that Evelyn made and also that David made. Sorry about that. I want to start off by re-emphasizing a point that Evelyn made and David made, and that is we are not here just to say no. We're not here looking to pick a fight. All we are seeking to do is to make sure that something like this, which is probably if not the most important, one of the most important decisions that the club will make. We want to make sure it is done in a thoughtful manner, and we want to make sure it takes into consideration the needs of all three sections of the club. That's what we're advocating here. What we're going to do is present to you some of the issues that we see coming up that we believe all of us collectively need to think through in order to come up with what's the best decision. One of the reasons that this is obviously so important to us is that, as we all know by now, tennis may not like to go elsewhere, but tennis can find other land. It's a lot easier to say tennis go elsewhere than it is to say golf go elsewhere. So we're trying to balance those two things here. We understand that if tennis locates on the cornfield, it has certain benefits. It keeps us all together at one club. It obviously eliminates the acquisition cost of the land. Those are big pros. What a big con is, it means that golf can expand there. And we're also not standing here today saying to you that golf's going to start work on that par 3 course or extending the range tomorrow. I think most of you know by now that's not the way we do things. We do them in a slow, gradual manner. We're simply saying that if tennis goes there, golf can't do anything else down the road. So the first thing that really has us scratching our heads is what's changed. If you think back to about 5.5 months ago, in late January, the tennis relocation blog said that the land that the club owns is not ideal for many reasons. Then a couple of weeks ago, all of a sudden, when there was the tennis relocation meeting, the land that the club owns is the only viable current option and the only option that makes financial sense. That's probably a fair statement if you assume, again, you don't have to pay for the land and any other land will require $1 million, $1.5 million or more to acquire. I'm not going to go through the detailed budget for the new rackets facility. Ethelinda already walked through that pretty much, but it's a lot of money. It's over $4 million, close to $4.3 million. And we in golf sit and scratch our head and said, well, what if we all of a sudden had $4 million? What could we do? All these things we've been talking about literally for decades. Maybe we go do them in one fell swoop. But there are also a couple of other things that jump out at us from that budget. One is there's $250,000 in there for legal fees. It's great to put together a conservative budget. We're all for that. But that to us makes a real big statement that it's not necessarily a slam dunk by a long shot that these courts in the racket facility can be located on the cornfield, that there's a lot of appeals, a lot of negotiations along the way that need to happen. The other thing that's real interesting to us is buried in this budget, I was able to find an $8,000 line for a wind fence. However, I couldn't find anything for sound mitigation to impact the impact of the noise, to minimize the impact of the noise on the driving range and the golf course. That's a really important issue to us. It doesn't appear to be addressed in here. I may have missed it. I'm willing to admit that, but I don't see anything in here for sound mitigation. The obvious question comes up is $4.3 million. How's it going to be paid for? Some of these things are pretty obvious. Higher tennis dues, higher tennis member assessments, higher assessments on new members. The ones in red, though, are the ones that are potentially a concern to us in golf. How much of any money will we be getting from the gun school? What will be the amount in terms of the bank debt? How much of the tennis reserves will be used up, which currently stand at $400,000? And how much of the Washington club-wide reserves, which are currently about $360,000, will be used? And then lastly, something that's great if we can do it is gifts or loan for members. So what are our issues with some of these financing sources? I think we got a page out of order. Financing concern. There we go, thank you. What are our issues with some of these financing sources? Golf has used some of the club money in the past. We continue to do things like enter into leases for mowing equipment and the like. But golf has never asked the club to place a mortgage on any club land. This would be the first time the club, to my knowledge, will borrow and will borrow in a way that there'd be a mortgage placed on some portion or perhaps even all of the club property. So we're very worried about the implications of what happens if the tennis membership falls and we can't pay for it. Where do we get the money to make up for that shortfall? Potentially, the bank could take over the land the rackets facilities are on, but then they could also potentially go back as a whole. If we use the club reserves to help pay the upfront cost of the facility, those reserves are not going to be there to pay for a shortfall. We need to make sure that when we fund this, we don't draw down on 100% of the club or the tennis reserves so that we can deal with rainy days, cost overrun, other unexpected events. That's what we're trying to manage against.
Because I mute them and they keep on doing it.
Deborah on Zoom, could you please mute your microphones, please?
And two in the app or the rear section. Line track and embarkation stations are located at the bottom of the stair.
You're good. I turned them off.
All right. Okay. Last financing concern that we just want to talk about for a minute is that our club, like any other business, any other club, doesn't have unlimited debt capacity. $1 that is borrowed to fund the construction of the new tennis courts is $1 that can't be borrowed to fund the irrigation system, which golf desperately needs, or to make improvements to the beach, or to make improvements to Club Hole. So we all need to be cognizant there's only so many dollars the club can borrow, and we need to plan so that those dollars, passage to borrow those dollars is left over for things like our irrigation system and the like. Not saying that's not happening, but it's just something we all need to be thinking about. Just want to turn for a couple of minutes to a tennis survey, which I think a lot of you probably participated in and filled out. And wanted to point out potential issues that we see with that survey. First, on the survey, the average age of the respondents is 58. I'm not a spring chicken, but it seems to me that the average age of our tennis players isn't quite up at 58 years of age, but I may be wrong. It asks questions without mentioning the cost. And when the results were published, interestingly, the full survey wasn't published. Only selective results were published on the blog. One of the most important questions that wasn't published on the blog is member willingness to pay for a capital assessment. And as you look on the chart here, you can see between the somewhat unlikely at 16% and the extremely unlikely at 8%, that it's not an unreasonable assumption to say that about a quarter of the tennis members, there's a good chance that they just will not pay any assessments and we could lose them. Again, none of us know. We could lose none. We could lose 5%, 10%, 25, 50%. We don't know. We're raising this because there's obviously a significant group of people who are concerned about having to pay an assessment. They may drop out. This is information that we need to have before we go much further along in this process so that the people who are remaining will know what their financial obligation will be. Next set of questions is, so what's really important to the tennis membership? And I found some of this pretty interesting. It seems that 3/4 of the membership would like to have a bubble or lights. Now, the proposal does include lights, but I should also note that lights can't be built without a modification to the zoning regulations. It does allow for lights, but it doesn't allow for bubble. So 3/4 of the people who replied want lights or a bubble. 62% of the people willing to travel outside of the town of Washington, but we've heard an awful lot about the importance of having it basically be right next to the golf course, even though the majority of the people are willing to travel outside of Washington. And only just over half of the respondents want to do it on the existing club land. Next slide. Just want to close by spending a moment on the gun school. And as you know, the gun school has a new headmistress and a lot of talk in terms about putting a new proposal on how it would work if the gun school were to use our property as opposed to vice versa. And we're struck by a couple of things with the proposal to the gun school. First is it seems just a little bit lopsided to us. So we're asking the gun school to pay up front $500,000 to $1 million for the use of the tennis courts. We're not going to ask them to pay anything for golf. Annually, and they use that golf a lot. So we're just not asking for that upfront payment. Annually, we're asking $25,000 for the use of the tennis courts, but only $7,500 for the use of the golf course. And they use that for matches, for practice with the students. Many of you, if you use the driving range, will frequently see the gun school kids there. So it's a little bit lopsided in favor of what gun paying for tennis, not golf. I should mention that this is as far from being accepted by golf, by the gun school, I'm sorry. But I should also mention that there was a meeting with the gun school. And when Ethelyn requested to attend that meeting, she was told she could not, even though tennis was represented at that meeting. So what we're really trying to do is to make sure that because this is critical to golf as it is critical to tennis, that we'll have that involvement. And with that, Mr. Underwood. Thank you for the audience.
Hi, everyone. Ray Underwood here. I would just like to say, before beginning to discuss the slides, I'd like to say that I believe golf would like to support our tennis colleagues, but golf has been left out of this discussion so far. So here's hoping that that will change. Anyhow, so to begin a little history, when I became golf chair, the gun school was not allowed to play on our course. Matter of fact, I believe they had been asked to leave sometime prior. When the club and gun school were involved trying to negotiate a new lease for tennis back in 2006, 2007 to benefit our tennis folks, I offered the limited use of our course. The excerpt you see here is from a letter from Jim Graham mailed to me as golf chair. Myself, along with the golf committee, came up with an agreement that we could accept to be renewed annually that has continued to this day with some revisions. Now I see from Michael Gore's letter to Ethelyn, he has somehow usurped our section's authority to do the same thing we've done all along. Not only that, but the president, GM, and a couple of other non-golf representatives made up a committee that met with the gun school, excluding our golf chair from attending, even after she requested to be included. It seems something dramatic has changed in our club's governance, and not for the better, when one section's interests seem to take precedent over another's. That over the years, the golf section has made innumerable capital improvements. I'd like everybody to read this list. There'll be a quiz on this later. Just kidding. Anyhow, the improvements to our course include the driving range, clubhouse, other facilities. I personally take great pride in what we've been able to accomplish while trying to maintain our economic diversity of our membership. We did so prioritizing and considering what our membership could afford, something that continues to this day. And then I fit as many projects as we did onto one slide, but that'll leave some off. In total, they add up much more than 4.2 million, even without adjusting for inflation. Yet they've all been part of our normal annual budget, paid for by golf alone, without managing club property, and without driving members away. Golf dues are higher than they were when I joined. Imagine that. More than 50 years ago, but, 30 years ago. But we still have an economically diverse membership, always one of the Washington Club's greatest attributes. At our club, it's possible to have a foursome that consists of the town's richest man, his lawyer, a local teacher or t-ball coach, and someone who could paint their house. And in a sense, that reflects our larger community, and I think something we should all be proud of. So continuing on. Anyhow, the simplest example of how we've managed the capital improvements is how we transformed our clubhouse over the years. I'm not sure how many of you remember this from way back then. It was originally constructed in the 1890s. Here's what it looked like after a team of oxen moved it to our current course in 1905. Anybody recognize that? The clubhouse has grown steadily since then through additions and renovations. Here's what it looked like in the 1950s. Starting to look a little bit like it does today. And this is what our clubhouse looks like today. Recreating it from scratch would cost more than what tennis is planning to spend on its clubhouse, but we've been able to prudently improve and update ours little by little with planning and without assessment or mortgages. So moving on, here you see golf's next big capital investment, our biggest ever, a replacement of our irrigation system, which is now more than 40 years old. This is truly an existential project. If you can't water your greens, you lose your course. We'll probably have to borrow money. The projected cost is estimated close to $1 million, but we're handling it in a way we always have handled capital improvements, incrementally with planning, prioritization, without putting our own section or the rest of the club at risk. In fact, we've already bought the new irrigation pump. And at that, I would like to turn it over to David Owen again to speak briefly about Washington Land Use Commissions. And as many of you know, besides the golf chair, David was a former Washington Zoning Commission chairperson.
Yeah, sure. I'm also from now on, I'm going to be a former PowerPoint setter upper. I apologize again. My head is spinning with how I needed a 10-year-old to help me. I was the chairman of the, I was on zoning, I was on ZBA for a few years. I was on zoning for 20 years. I was the chairman for 6 years. The 22 years ago, 20 years ago, not everyone here may remember, but the Washington Club wanted to do something similar in the cornfield, build a tennis facility in the cornfield. The commission applied to change the town zoning regulations in 2001. I wasn't the chairman then, I was on the commission, but I recused myself. This was the petition. It was more modest than what the club has in mind now. You can click along there. The vote on the planning commission, which had to receive it first, was 5-0 against it. The voting on the zoning commission was 4-1 against. The one vote for it was a tennis member who I thought should have recused herself, but did not. The Northwest Hills Council of Government wasn't crazy about it either. I know that the relocation committee feels that it has zoning all figured out, land use all figured out, wetlands all figured out. But I think that past history shows us that there's at least a chance that this proposal faces the same challenge that it did 22 years ago. And that there's at least a chance that it will be turned down again. And given that chance, it seems to me that the club ought to have a backup plan, a plan B, especially if relocating the tennis facility is an emergency. But there is no plan B. So that would be, I vote for plan B, whatever it is. I think that the club should have it. And here's Jennifer Bowl. I think she could say that there are some frequently asked questions on the club's website. We felt that they weren't complete, and Jennifer's going to ask some infrequently asked questions.
And I'm also the last speaker, so we are going to get to your questions momentarily, I promise. So here are some things that are on our mind. Probably most importantly is what land is going to be used as collateral for the loan to support the tennis project. We assume the beach will be part of that collateral, that the golf course will be part of that collateral, because the cornfield alone will not provide enough collateral probably to support the loan that's going to be required. If, oh, okay. If golf really has no agency over the cornfield, why have we been the ones paying the property tax on it for all these years? What is the real deadline from the Frederick Gun School? We're not clear about that. What happens if the gun school decides not to contribute? What's the financial impact of that? And we're very, very concerned about the noise from tennis and particularly from pickleball, which is extremely loud, and what that's going to do in terms of degrading the experience on the range and golf course. And we would like to see that addressed in the plan. As Alan mentioned, we're very curious about why the plan requires $250,000 in legal fees and what that indicates in terms of what we're expecting in terms of pushback. And we really would like golf to be more included in the process of figuring out where tennis goes. Ethelyn? Oh, sorry.
Because I was looking at Lee Einbinder in the back of the room and was beginning to get upset. This is what happens when a finance person talks to a non-finance person. I don't adequately translate, so I'm going to take the blame for it. Jen mentioned something about what club land was going to be collateral for a bank loan, and mentioned the potential, which still exists, that it could be more than just the land which the tennis courts would go on. That is far from the way it will potentially be. We don't really know. There's a good chance it could be limited to just the land that the rackets facility will go on, and we will not have to mortgage the other land. However, ultimately, if you think through the steps of the borrowing, if that land, the collateral value of that land isn't enough to cover the loan, the bank could then come after the club and ask the club to pay, even though they don't have mortgage property. So there will not necessarily be a mortgage on 100% of the club property. That's one of the many questions that's up in the air.
To take this down a notch. So the question is, where do we go from here? And what we recommend is we need to slow down the process so that it's more thoughtful. We need to form a committee that represents the interests of all sections. We need to explore other options, other properties, other interim solutions. We need to know and disclose all the facts to all members of the club, every section, so that we can come up with a thoughtful plan to move ahead. So now I'm going to open it up to questions and answers. And before we start, each person with a question, and I'll point them out, has to come up to this microphone, because that's how the folks on Zoom can hear at the same time. And so I'm ready as soon as Paul tells me.
Testing.
Okay, you need to introduce yourself first and then ask your question. Okay. Closer. Hi, Jim.
Washington Club member since 1985. My question is, has there been any outreach for donations, either land donations or money donations, that anyone knows of?
I am not aware of any outreach yet. I think that if there's anybody,
I think part of the long-term plan. If you go back to the early.
yeah, he's covered.
Again, you may want to speak to this more than I can, but if you go back to one of my earlier slides, there's a whole bunch of potential sources of funding that are being considered. One of them is, as the club has done in the past, which is to go out to the membership and seek either an outright donation or a loan at some sort of favorable interest rate. But the problem is there's just so much information that isn't known right now. It's really very hard to put numbers on what's going to come from each of the various sources of funding, but that is one that would be very seriously considered.
Okay.
My name is Jillian Calf and I,
Just pull it down, Jillian.
my name is Jillian Calf and I've been a golf member since 2020. And I love it. But what I want to say is that the list of I wants from the tennis committee seems extraordinarily wishful thinking and the numbers attached to them. I mean, if somebody's building a house today, you know, they said their clubhouse is $445,000. I beg to differ with a list of what they want in it. Also, just the amount of tennis courts, it just seems so preposterous. It's so over the top. Can it come down to reality? I mean, I understand now they're using 4 courts. How does it jump to 14? Or I think it's 12 or 14. And I'm not aware of paddleball and backboards and, you know, various other things and a bubble. I mean, can we support a bubble in the winter? And what about maintenance? I see nothing there about maintenance. I see something there about, you know, landscaping, but nothing about maintenance. And that's going to be another big number. So who's doing the budgets here? Because it doesn't seem a logical progression of monies. So that's what I have to say. And I think putting the golf membership in jeopardy, you know, with the possibly assuming some of the loan commitment is so scary. Because not only do we need irrigation, we need a new road. We need improvements to the clubhouse like the bathrooms. I mean, thank God we have the kitchen, but there are other things that the golf really needs that we're just waltzing right by it. But the road is horrific. Thank you, Jillian. Hold on.
Again, we're trying to do our best to be accurate and full disclosure. What we put up there was, we're doing our best to be accurate and to provide full disclosure. What we had on the screen was the capital budget, the cost to build the facility. There's other budget work that has been done that takes into consideration the maintenance for the cost for the courts, the property taxes, a whole bunch of the electricity, all these ongoing items. They haven't been forgotten about by a long shot. It's just in a different budget that in the interest of time we didn't go into. But frankly, that's also one of the reasons why the dues will end up going up, because it's going to cost a lot more to run our own court facility than to just sort of do it in conjunction with the gun school. But nobody's forgotten about the course, those courses. They're just in a different line item set.
John. Next.
Yes, my name's Bill Fairburn. My family was one of the first to come here from New York City back in the early 60s before it became a popular place from New York. So I have a lot of memories here. There used to be a stage here in the drum lecture, put on a musical production every year, and I was up there on a couple of plays. But anyhow, my concern is about the financing of this. Hope is not a strategy. And as I read this, it looks like a well-calculated budget, $4.3 million. But hope is sort of the basis for how it's going to be paid for. You know, is the gunnery going to give us money? You know, our members going to loan us money at what interest rate? You know, all these things are very speculative. Can someone, and I in all the things I've read, and it's a shame on me, but how you know, is this going to impact the members in the tennis section? Can someone come up with a sheet, you know, balance sheet showing what it's gonna cost, you know, mortgage, 7% interest, how many years? All these contingencies, you know, we get money for the gun, we don't. What the impact is going to be on the current members of the tennis section, and to go to them, rather than a poll about are you likely or unlikely, to say, look, you're gonna have to pay 1,000 assessment, a 5,000 assessment, and 10,000. And the cost of running the tennis section, in addition to the debt service, is going to be this. So we have a professional, we've got electricity, blah, blah, blah. And then go to them and say, how many of you will stay here as a member, if these are what the costs? I mean, it's very simple to do. And I think, you know, I'm putting the whole land issue aside. You know, I think everybody's been up their mind about that. But, you know, I'm concerned about the financial viability of this. Does it impact the courts? I mean, the club's financial condition. And the other thing that's important too is Estelle Bronson, who I think many of the people here know, is probably as close to a saint as anyone in the town of Washington will ever be. When I went on the board of governors back in the 1990s, Estelle called me up and said, Bill, this is a club in the country. It's not a country club. And, you know, when you go out to the golf clubhouse and you look up at the plaques on the wall of the people that won tournaments, the gentleman who started the Augusta National Golf Club was on there. My mechanic was on there. My butcher was on there. All these local people could afford to go there. It wasn't going to be a country club where people had to pay for things that they weren't going to use. They weren't going to go to the beach or go to Canada. I didn't want to eat there. So it's important from the culture of the club. If it gets to a point where the tennis section can pay the debt service, and now it's going to be assessed against all the members, what's it going to do to the people here that are working folks? You know, I mean, so my concern is let's get the numbers, go to the tennis section members right now and say, can you afford this?
Thank you.
The Einbinder. I've been a member of the club for 25 plus years. I've been a member of golf, tennis, and beach for all those years, and I think we're in a really sad time for this club. It's, you know, Washington, Bridgewater, Roxbury, the general area. I think we're making a mockery of ourselves. I think other people are laughing at us. Up until 1 year ago, I thought we were one club. I realized we have different sections. People have the options to, you know, pay for their sections, but I thought we had a community. And it's been very clear to me, we're not one club. And Ethelyn, I think you said, or someone else said, you know, slow down. That's one of your recommendations. We have been slowing down for over a year now. We do have, no pun intended, a gun to our head. And we have a timeline, and Pels and others can talk about it, but we are very concerned that even if we stick to our base plan now, we will not be ready for the season, whatever season that is, 27, when we have to be out of there. And so we have spent a year plus debating where to go, what the costs are, and we don't have time. Now, there's been a lot of information, frankly, that's either false information or information that, frankly, I'm surprised that's being disseminated today, because with any business, corporation, nonprofit, you have to have a small group that talks about things before they're broadly disseminated. And, you know, it feels a little bit like this is a little bit of a hatchet job for golf to scare the membership about the costs and all these other things. Well, the committee is working actively. There's going to be a survey going out in the not too distant future about some of these options. The cost, we have been very conscious about not building the Taj Mahal. I mean, but if you listen to the folks here, that's what we're building. We've been very thoughtful about how many courts we need. The pickle and paddle, frankly, are something, you know, I'm not a paddle player, but something that we thought the broader club is interested in. We're going to have surveys to figure out if there's interest in that and how we pay for that. It's also been clear that, you know, first of all, I want to thank Michael Gore, who's I think in the back there. Just we got to cut out the vitriol and name calling, and every time someone says something, it comes back to litigate or whatever. I mean, this is just nonsense. Michael Gore has done a tremendous job leading this club, leading the. Michael has been more than fair. People are accusing him of just looking out for tennis. I know if I was in his position, I would not be. Michael has gone overboard to, he's just as much, probably more of a golfer than a tennis player. I think he's pretty good at both. So, but he's obviously been active in this club for as long as anyone. Cares about golf members' views. We have gone out of our way to include golf. Maybe there are people that feel personally affronted by that, but we tried to, respect everyone's views. There is a process we need to go through, right? We don't have all the answers. I can tell you though, and I'm the finance guy on the committee, full disclosure, I'm confident we're going to make this work, okay? They could scare you all they want. There's tremendous support. We've also said from day one that tennis is going to pay for what tennis is building. So, for all the golf members only, and if you're concerned about that, tennis is going to pay for that. Now, if we build paddle or pickle and a golf player wants to play there, we're going to figure out if there's a membership fee or something like that. We have not gone out for donations. We have not gone out for loans. Michael sent me something, sent it to a bunch of people this morning. What we're talking about today was discussed, 40 years ago, when the club was considering this. I think Lynn Cornell, the president at the time, I think Michael's father was on the committee. And all these issues we're talking about, there's multiple ways we can pay for this. I'm very confident we're going to pay for it. Now, that may mean assessments. It may mean, increasing dues. It could be loans or donations. We haven't figured that all out. It is a process, but we will get there. We're not going to burden non-tennis members with things that are being used by tennis. So let's just stop that conversation. Alan is right, made some points about the loan. I personally had discussions with the bank, so I think I have all the facts. It's not, they're preliminary, it's far from being done, but we think that just having a lien on that cornfield property will be sufficient. Again, we haven't finalized this, but, Alan, I think, corrected the earlier statement. We don't think there'll be liens on all the other properties. That's the hope. And we're going to be prudent about how much money club borrows. No one wants to put the club in jeopardy. And again, I think there's plenty of membership support to finance a lot of what we need to do. We're going to try to figure out the right balance. We're not going to deplete all the club reserves. I respect the fact that the club has to be left in a good financial position. So, in any event, I just wanted to get some of that off my chest.
Alan, do you want to respond to any of that? I mean.
Speechless. I'm not really, honestly, I mean, we're friends. I'm not really sure. We're friends, but I'm not really sure what you said that was all that different than what I say. Maybe I hear what I want to hear. Maybe you hear what you want to hear. But I thought I got up here and said, we don't know how this is going to be funded. I never said I didn't think it could be funded. I said there are multiple sources. We need to see how they work out. I was on 2 of the 3 bank calls with you. I think I fairly stated that we're going to try to start with just putting a lien on the property where the courts would go. We don't know what will happen beyond that. We don't know whether that could potentially be an obligation to the entire club. And then if that comes to that, it has to be worked out how it will be dealt with. I think you and I said the same thing. I've never once said, I don't think this can be funded. I just said, I think we need to do it in a prudent manner, think it through, make sure everybody understands the implications of the borrowing. So I'm not sure where we have a disconnect. No, I know that, but I don't.
I think there's some other statements that,
Yeah. Because, I mean, the first thing I try to be clear is none of us can answer the question on how this can be funded or how big the assessment can be. What we can do is basic math and say, look, if we get lots of big donations, the assessment and the dues increases will go down. If gun gives us a lot of money, they'll go down. If gun gives us less, it will go up. I mean, that's all we can say is directionally what would happen. But I guess the reason we've raised that point a couple of times is we just think an important first step is to really try to get a sense of how solid the financial support is from tennis. How much people would be willing to put in for assessments, how much they'll be willing to take for higher dues, because once we have that, then a lot of us could potentially be a lot more comfortable that there won't be a problem here. We're trying to point out that that is a very important first step to any process.
One thing, and I'm gonna come to you, one thing I do wanna mention is that this is not just a typical tennis layout. If you want to go to Warramug or Litchfield or any place else, we don't have 10 courts, 2+2 pickleball courts and paddleball. We don't have a viewing area. We don't have a kitchenette necessarily. So this is not just a typical ask. This is atypical, over the top proposal. You're next.
Hi, I'm Natalia Macias. My family and I have been members of the club since 2020. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we're members of all 3 sections of the club. My other family members are active participants in the other sections of the club. I just wanted to say one of the reasons that we wanted to be a part of this community and also of this club specifically is because it is a club that's accessible to everyone and where people are all treated equally and with the same level of consideration. I think considerate is a really important word and something that's really important to be. And we knew about that history of the club. It's how I would like us to raise our family. And so I want to say I'm grateful for that. I hope we can continue that. And I think it's one of the most important things we can do as a club. And I think the fact that the club is a more humble club is an important part of that. It is. You can't do it without being that way, right? And that we're very slow and considerate in what's been going on in the golf section. Thank you for educating us about that. I didn't know the history that well. I also had one specific question, which was I have heard that Rumsey would be willing to lease us courts, and I don't know anything more about that. I don't know if we know more about that, but I was just curious about whether that's an option that we have available to us.
I don't know that answer. I think Michael would be the best person to answer that question. Yeah. Thanks, Michael.
Michael Gore, president of the club. We had a meeting with Rumsey. The discussion of renting their courts did not come up. That was not something that they had offered. They were offering potential land for the club to purchase. We looked at that land and for a number of reasons, wetlands, the slope and other things, it was deemed unacceptable compared to other land outside of Washington. But there was no discussion and no offer to lease their courts.
Okay, thanks. Howard?
Thank you. My name is Howard Barnett.
You almost have to kiss it.
Yeah, okay. It's not my favorite. I'm a former governor and treasurer.
No.
I keep hearing that the cornfield is thank you. I keep hearing the phrase, the cornfield is, quote, the only viable current option for the tennis section. And I'm afraid that phrase seems almost calculated to foreclose any discussion. As we've heard today, I think it'd be more accurate to say that the golf section has no other viable option than the cornfield. The reality is that every potential site for tennis has pros and cons, and they should be fully considered by the board. Just 6 months ago, as was pointed out, we were told that a piece of land in New Milford it wasn't just viable, it was the best option. Ideal in many ways is what the blog said, whereas the cornfield was, quote, not ideal for many reasons. And then all of a sudden on May 7th at the town hall, we were told the cornfield was superior. And now the New Milford land is evidently not even viable. It didn't get any farther away or any more expensive, and yet no detailed explanation has been offered. I understand the primary benefit of the cornfield, to the tennis section anyway, is that it is free. And I'm just wondering if free is a necessary condition to viability as far as the Tennis Relocation Committee is concerned. It certainly should not be. And let me close by asking the same question in a different way. What if the cornfield did not exist? Would the Tennis Relocation Committee then conclude there is no viable current option at all, and therefore the tennis section should be banned? I don't think so. They would consider a number of possible sites that are currently available, presumably including New Milford, and they would explain the pros and cons of each. And if none suited now, they would recommend that we wait a bit. And I think that's exactly what we should do. This eventual need has been known for a long time, and many sites have come and gone in the last 20 or 25 years. Let's slow down and together find a solution that has broad support within the club, satisfies the needs of all the sections. Thank you.
Hi, this is Matt Mazzala. I'm a member of all three sections. I just want to say two things. One, the Tennis Relocation Committee is running through a lot of different scenarios. So this $4.2 million, the 10 courts, the paddle, pickle, that's one scenario that's being considered. It's really important to note that that's not the base case. That's not where we're actually starting from. It is a potential scenario, but there are plenty of other scenarios that are going through. I think it's also important to note that the survey, the tennis section that was shown earlier, the intention of that was, first of all, it was done a year ago, if not more. There's so much more information, and that information is going to be shared with the tennis section to enlighten, I think, to Alan's point or someone else's point, like, you know, what is the tennis section? What are the members really willing to pay for? That is going to happen. There's no question. I'm on the relocation committee, and we're making sure that's going to go through. And I think it's also important to note there was some misinformation from over here. The current facility has 8 courts, not 4 hard true, 4 hard courts. And I think to the point that Lee made, I'm hoping that today marks the new beginning for all of us. We've got to move forward as a club. We've got to move forward as one unit for the sake of our children. We're going to be the ones who are going to be joining this facility, whether it's in the cornfield, whether it's in New Milford, wherever it is. We got to start thinking about the future as one and stop the fighting.
My name is Philip Farmer. I've been a member since 1986. My wife and I, who's deceased, have served as governors almost continuously during that time period, going forward as soon as we were corporate members. I have the unique position of being president of the club twice and being tennis chair once. And when I was first president, and we were faced with spending $500,000 to redo the courts at the gunnery, and they were not willing to contribute anything. I felt that that was wrong, and we had a vote of the membership at that time to move to the cornfield area. That was stymied by neighbors and also a zoning determination that that was an expansion of use. That has since changed with zoning saying, if you lose your lease, we will be willing to relook at this as a needed extension. So as more recently, I've been on the strategic planning committee, and we have taken steps to write mission statement and understand what the club is and what our culture is. In the time period that I've been a member of golf since 1998 or so, there have been extensive renovations, which we appreciate. At no time during my membership has the golf committee, comprised of a few select people and probably the best players, at no time have they ever surveyed the club at large. I have surveyed the club on behalf of the overall club in the last time that I was president. So to have a survey of what your members of golf want and are willing to pay for might be beneficial. Thank you.
Come back for 1 second.
Okay. I just wondered if you could clarify what zoning had told you and what you mean by zoning.
Not exactly sure what the timing was, but zoning said explicitly that if we lost our lease with the gunnery, they would be willing to revisit. I don't know the exact timing of that. Thank you.
Yes. I'm Jane Barnett, and my husband and I have been members of all three sections for more than 25 years. I have some prepared notes, but I just want to respond to what Phil Farmer said. I don't know that much about zoning, but I think that just because you lost your lease is not a consideration for zoning. You can correct me if I'm wrong, David. Okay, just because your lease terminated is not a consideration for zoning. Zoning has regulations, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, David, unless the law has changed. And regarding Ein Binder's point about not increasing the dues for other members, I understand that the relocation committee is very sincere in trying to have tennis pay for all the costs. I truly believe that. But what they say is not legally binding. The board can increase their dues anytime they want without a vote of the members. That's true. So what I was planning to say is that I have heard what the golf section said. And I heard that cramming this huge record facility in the golf course will be very damaging to the golf section now and in perpetuity. And frankly, I'm surprised that this is not a concern of the Tennis Relocation Committee or the board. And the cornfield is problematic, even for the tennis section. It seems like around 75% of the tennis members want lights, and that is not allowed in the cornfield. I understand that the Lake Boardwalk Club tried to apply for lighted courts, and they were denied, or they just gave up. It's not possible at this time. So the base also is too small for even what the tennis section wants. Mike Guara already said in January that this land is not ideal for tennis for many reasons. So my question really is, after spending 4.2 million, what will the club have? Well, golf and tennis, we box into this land that is too small for both of them. But if the club purchases land instead, the club will acquire a new valuable investment instead of damaging an existing asset. The relocation committee presented club cohesion as one of the reasons for the move to the cornfield. It's a really lovely idea, but is this realistic when the three sections are completely different, operate separately, and have different needs? There's no synergy at all. We can see now that the proposal has already rifted this club apart. And if the proposal is approved, it will even be worse. I can see battles continuing forever. You know, tennis wants to build structures that golf doesn't want. You know, there will be like noisy tennis events. Tennis will admit more members to use the record facility. I don't think golf would like that. The three sections have coexisted 75 years amicably. They have different financial structures. They have different campus.
and they have different governance. They operate independently, and it's a really delicate balance, and I think we shouldn't upset it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any Zoom questions right now? I don't wanna. Okay. Okay. I can't actually see it. You want to read it?
The Zoom question from David Resnick was, if the process has been inclusive, why was the golf chair not included in the meeting with the gun school to discuss their use of the club's golf and tennis facilities?
I can't answer that question. I think only Michael can. Right there.
The meeting with the gun school was not to discuss, well, initially the plan was to discuss the gun school and the relationship with the Washington Club on a whole. And the different section had asked to present a proposal about how the gun school could use their facility. Because we were still talking at the committee level, at the golf committee level about what that might mean, and there was not enough time to come up with something that might that the golf committee had agreed with and had time to think about. It was discussed at the board meeting prior to that meeting with the gun school, that the relationship with the Washington Club with respect to the beach or with the golf course was not going to be discussed because we didn't have enough information to do that. And so the discussion was simply to talk about the tennis relocation and what the gun school's requests needs were going forward in terms of tennis courts. So that was the purpose of that meeting.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. My name is Mark Blair. I'm a member of all three sections, use them all actively, and I am on the board. I want to address what Mike said in a second, but there are definitely legitimate concerns around what needs to happen to relocate tennis. There are no solutions without compromises, and there are difficult decisions that the club faces. People are concerned about the process, and the tennis members will have the first vote once there is a budget. And so if tennis members will not support whatever the financing plan is, we won't be able to relocate our tennis court. But to the point of inclusion and the like, I really appreciate those of you that are now a part of the relocation. But to set the record straight, I remember that the golf committee said they did not want to be a part of this a year plus ago. And now there are members that are really interested in it. And they're, from my understanding, they're being welcomed. And if they're not, you should share that with the folks on the board if you'd like to be a part of it. And with respect to this last, over a year ago, I think you said you would never support moving this to the cornfield. And as recently as the meeting with the gun school, you said you wanted to attend because you would not allow them to use the golf course if in fact they were going to use tennis. To me, that's not constructive, that's not dynamic, and that is a real reason why it's hard to include people in a meeting with the gun school there. Mike didn't say that, but when I was on the phone, I was aghast that you would actually try to use that relationship to stand in the way of something that is a problem, is a challenge, but at the same time, we have to all remember we are one club. There is one legal body. There are legitimate financial obligations of the club, but the Board of Governors will establish a process and go to the members. And if the members don't agree to this, first tennis, then the overall members, we won't wind up with the tennis section. That's the unfortunate truth of this path.
Okay, I'm just gonna respond to a couple of things. One is, I was told that I could not, our section could not negotiate with the Frederick Gun School in the past, in the history of this club, each section has negotiated relationships with the Frederick Gun School, and to be told I was not able to put me in a corner. And I am not about to sign a 20-year agreement with the Frederick Gun School when this whole issue is in turmoil. And that is exactly why I said we would go and proceed with our discussions with Frederick Gun School directly, which we still may do. So the other thing is that it is untrue that we said we would not like to be a part of a tennis relocation committee. We had a meeting with Michael Gora and Michelle Balfour with the Sunday morning group. That's Sunday morning group. That is not the golf committee. And at that meeting, it became clear that the cornfield was the optimal choice. And, you know, there was a bit of angst between the two groups. But no one at any point said we did not want to be part of a committee. And I was never asked to appoint somebody from our golf section to be part of that. Okay, next.
Thank you. My mother taught me never to talk to people with your back to them.
Excellent, excellent.
So, Tony D'Aloisio, member of the 3 sections. So first of all, I want to appreciate this group of people who I know their hearts were coming forth and putting forth this information was really helpful. So let's give it. It became obvious to me about a month ago when I had heard many of my friends involved talking about some of the challenges that they felt with where the tennis committee was going. And having been an avid tennis member, I also have a lot of friends in tennis as well. Have that in my heart as well. And so I decided I was going to start talking to people, and I talked to a lot of about what their point of view was and where the information, the misinformation was. And what I found was that there was a lot of misinformation, that a lot of the questions that were on the table had been answered by people who were very thoughtful on the relocation committee about things that were going on. Things that I heard from some of my golf buddies who really were sort of saying this is a complete that was not really true. And that Michael, in many conversations I've had with them, has actually really been thinking with the committee quite a bit about many things that have been questioned here today. Now, I'm not suggesting that there's a right or wrong answer here. I don't really have a point of view. I've tried to stay very neutral. What has become obvious to me is that what we have not been doing is talking and listening effectively as members of this club, this club that we all love so much. And that's really what's needed. And I think, Ethlyn, that was really one of the main purposes that you guys had doing this. And I appreciate your actually having this conversation, putting it forth. What it says to me is that more of that has to happen. Not in an effort to slow things down, but an effort to really have a dialogue face to face, people talking and listening, getting facts, the facts that we need to be able to make a meaningful decision for something that's so monumental for our club. So I've been an advocate of process moving forward, and I hope that based on this meeting, one of your objectives was for us to have a meaningful process forward. I've had many conversations with Michael about this, and I'm convinced that he's very much in favor of that. And I hope that that's the outcomes that we all have from this conversation.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah, Michelle, what? Come up here. Oh. I got it.
I agree, yeah, it's hard to. People on Zoom down.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
That's too easy.
Thank you. Chris, all right, this works. Go.
Hi, I'm Michelle Post. I'm the chair of the racket section. I just wanted to clarify some misinformation that was in your presentation. The only lighting that we have in our initial scenario is just for the platform tennis, and that is because it is a winter sport and it is necessary to have lighting. We are not planning any lighting for the other courts or pickleball courts. I will also say that I have done a lot of due diligence on understanding what our utilization rates are across our members, across our children. We are welcome to revisit those numbers, but those numbers are based on utilization going on last year and this year. So these are not, we are not trying to build a Taj Mahal racket club in this area. So I just want to clarify that. And then lastly, I also just want to say, I have young children. I want them to be part of this community going forward. It really saddens me as a parent to see our club so divisive. And I just hope that, you know, with the events that I have been planning at the racket section, we had a club-wide pickleball event. Many of them were golf members. Many of them had never even been to the tennis courts before. I hope that we can become one club. That is my wish. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Michelle. We don't have any more Zoom questions. And unless we have any other questions from the floor. Okay.
I'm Pels Matthews. I've been a member of the club since, I think, 2000. We have been members of all three sections. Currently, we're members of golf and currently we're members of golf and tennis. As many of you may know, I am on the relocation committee as well. And I, you know, for the people who are here for the relocation presentation, you may or may not know, we have looked for a year at many, many sites of land. So it was not just determined that the cornfields were our only option. It was determined by the Rackets Commission. Rackets Committee recommended the board that was our best option. Okay. And the language that's been used about it being the only option is of course not true. But financial impact of moving tennis is real, right? And we have the largest and busiest tennis section of any club I've ever been to, right? I go to clubs in Locust Valley where there are 500 members. They have a less busy tennis section than we do. It is a really vibrant part of our club, and I want to make sure that all the golf members understand that, okay? I am a golf member. I would also like to know if the golf committee is going to ask the golf members if they care if the tennis courts are built on the cornfields.
Good question. I think we easily can ask that question.
So why has it not been asked? I want the feedback from the golf membership.
Over here.
Before asking that question, can we provide them the speakers set up in the area so that they can hear the sound from 10 tennis courts, 2 pickleball courts, 2 practice balls for the pickleball courts, 2 paddleball courts, and parking for 60 cars. Maybe once everybody has all that information in place, might be a good time to take a survey, because it's always useful to take a survey when people have all the facts. Sorry?
The 60 parking spaces does include golf parking for the range as well. So that's an overall parking number that was planned for. So what I will also tell you is the proposal that is on the table from the RRC was driven by feedback from the survey, from what the tennis members wanted. So we did work to discover what it would cost. Now we have to go back and ask them if they're willing to pay for it. We recognize that. We may not ever build what is wished for, but we have to start somewhere. And that process had to start by taking a survey, which we did. I, as a golf, I would like to be asked my opinion of what the golf course plans and wants to do in the future. Today is the first time I've ever been exposed to golf course wants and needs. First time. And, you know, I recognize that this is a very existential moment for the club, right? The first time that we have to make a decision like this, it is when the golf course moved from Barnes Road to Golf Course Road, it was a big decision. I wish, and I said this at the location meeting, that somebody would give us a piece of land or give us a check to make this more financially viable. The numbers are the numbers, and what the tennis section is willing to support, I think, will be borne out over the next few months. I think there are lots of challenges, you know, and a budget is a budget. Doesn't mean we spend it. We have $250,000 in there for legal and zoning and other work. We know there will be challenges. We also believe, based on interactions with current members, that we will get sued. So it would be irresponsible of us not to have a budget for legal work. We may not have to spend it. Everybody plays nice, but if not, you know, we need to let everybody know that there's a budget item for that for those reasons. So, you know, there's nothing to be hidden. There's no secret. You know, I wish to God, this, if you look back in the history of the club, 1983, 2000, 2006, issue of tennis has been looked into. Every single time the club thought upper fields were the best solution. We're doing it again, and we think it's a good solution. It's not perfect. We recognize it has impacts on golf. There is no question. Tennis cannot move anywhere. Tennis can move to certain locations. We could certainly move half an hour away, and that would, you know, frankly, fracture the club, believe, in a way that's not reasonable. We think it is the best site, not that it is the only site. And best has, for us, has to do with cost, location, synergy. You know, we've talked about things at the relocation level that we think will enhance the golf experience. I understand there are things that you think will disintegrate the golf experience, noise primarily, and your ability to experience. But we think that having bathrooms and water and potentially an office for Corey and maybe a hitting station for winter and all of those things could be benefits to golf if we all agree to work together. I would love to see us work together. This has been, for me, a fabulous meeting. I don't share any animosity towards anyone. I want to find a solution that is in the best interest of the club overall. And I can't emphasize enough, you know, how much, if you look at the golf relocation committee, by the way, there are 6 members who are members of both sections. There are 3 members who are members of golf only. There are 3 members who are members of tennis only, and there's a general manager. So it's a pretty diverse crowd. We have 2 members, I believe, who are on the golf committee. Is that correct? Alan
and Jim.
Alan, Jim. So we do have, I think, broad representation on the Racket Relocation Committee. It's been going on for a year. There was a presentation here in the club, very poorly attended, in my opinion, based on this, the scope of this whole thing. You know, but the membership's going to have to speak up, and the tennis membership is going to have to decide what they're willing to fund and pay for. We get that. And we have to go through this process. And the process was, what do you want? We got what feedback from what they wanted. We looked at the utilization rates. We looked at the survey. We put together a proposal based on, we didn't, you know, we had to go meet with one school to ask them, what do you want? Because if you don't build enough courts, one school's out. Right? And so what does that mean to the financial picture? What does it mean to our relationship with Gunn that has gone on for over 50 years? right? We've gotten benefit from them, they've gotten benefit from us. You know, the tennis section has been free riding for a long time on school. I mean, we don't pay taxes, we don't pay utilities, we don't pay maintenance. You know, it's been a very cheap experience, and I appreciate that has allowed it to be accessible. But we have to move. They have told us they're going to reuse that land for something else. We're out. And the new section, it simply can't be as affordable. The cost of building courts today is not what it was 20, 40 years ago. So we are cognizant of that. We will make a recommendation to the board. The board will decide what to put forward to the membership. The tennis section will have to look at our proposal and put it forward to their membership and ask them if they're willing to pay for it. Because that is a huge factor, right? We could end up building half of what's on that. No one should be sitting here today saying this is a determined plan. This is a
Okay.
process.
Thank you.
Pals, I appreciate Pal's comment about the importance of surveys, but in actuality, as a tennis member, I was insulted that I went through all the trouble to answer all the questions on the survey. And I had to ask for the survey results. And I noted that on the club blog, the relocation committee only cherry picks the questions and answers that they want you to see. But if you ask for the entire survey results, there will even be comments from members. And I feel like the relocation committee has really interpreted the survey in the way in accordance with their vision. And I'm not sure if tennis members have even seen the survey. And I think that if the next time you do a survey, you should send the actual results to every single tennis member if they have gone through the trouble of answering the questions.
Okay.
I think folks are getting tired at this point. So unless there's a critical question.
And the, dues, I mean, that's where I speak, I remember the buck, back when I but give us the information that we did answer. If it turns out that there's not going to be enough members of the tennis to actually cover the cost of debt service and the actual maintenance and running of it, then they may not have tennis set. I mean, you can't turn this into a country club where the golf members, the beach members, the social members have to pay to keep the section going. Yes, that's fine. Please, I ask that. Michael. Mike and I.
No, yes, so I agree, right? So we have taken a long time to get a cost for what the tennis section wanted. We are now looking at what, as Pels had mentioned and Lee had mentioned, how that's going to affect members. We are taking the information from the meeting we had with the tennis section a few weeks ago. There is a tennis survey that we've been working on for the last 2 weeks. It is in its last iterations. It's going to club benchmarking, which helps us make surveys that are meaningful and that questions are not biased. That will be going out in the next week or so. It's just taken this much time to have enough information to ask relevant questions. You ask an excellent question. I just want to ask everybody, some people are saying too quickly, some saying that we're moving quickly enough. Just have patience. I think there are many of us who would like us to be at step 7, but we're only at step 3. We're going to get there. Okay, so Billy, your question is very important, and it's been on our minds since the beginning of this, and getting to the point where we're going to be able to gather that information getting that information and discussions with our tennis section, and with the work that the finance committee that mainly Alan and Lee and Brad Cedillo, who did an amazing job at getting real numbers about what these different things would cost, what 1 court would be, what 3 courts was 7. And we have a sheet. You can plug all these different things in, and it figures out to if we have this many members, we have this many courts, we have this many, new members coming in, assessments, boom, it plugs it all in it, and it's all interactive. So this is something that has just taken us this long to get here. So I appreciate the fact that you want that information, if you want it as well. It's just taking a little bit longer, and it is coming. It is coming. That's all I can is that's a plan. And yep. Agreed. And we just haven't, we're about to get to that point. So, thanks, Bill.
Yep, thank you. All right, Alan?
I want to try to end on a constructive note. I was invited to join the relocation committee and I was able to attend the last two meetings. And I do think we had good dialogue. I don't think we agreed on everything, but I think we progressed the discussions along and it was a constructive dialogue. I've also been invited to join the finance committee to work with Lee. And I think that was a very helpful educational process for us and Jackie and for the other members of the committee. So I think we are making steps that are going in the right direction here. I think Matt made a comment earlier about our being here complaining. We're not here to complain. That's not what the purpose of this is. The purpose is to say that we are one club and we make better decisions when everybody and different inputs are involved. Now, are we going to have however many 100 members of the club involved in every one of those? No. But can we set it up so we have reasonable representation from each of the three sections and everybody is putting an input? So for example, before a tennis survey goes out, it might be useful to have golf. It's what's going to be in that survey, because we may say, hey, let's tweak a question a little bit. You may get a better answer. You know, I've looked at the surveys. Yeah, everybody wants pickleball. If maybe it should have been, should we have said, do you want pickleball if that noise is really going to be troublesome on the driving range and the fourth green and the 6th tee on the course? It's things, and I'm not trying to slant it, I'm just trying to think of something off the top of my head, but it's making sure that everybody understands. We get that tennis needs a new home. We get that there are a lot of reasons why the cornfield is the best one. What we're not sure is that tennis members get why golf has so many concerns. To us, it just seems like you're sitting there going, hey, golf has sat on this land for decades. It hasn't done anything with it. Why do they care? And what we're trying to explain to you is we want to be helpful. We want to be involved in the process. That's the kind of things I've started doing. That's the things we're all trying to do. We're trying to work as one club to make it all happen, but it involves an open dialogue always in order for that to happen. Thank you.
All right, I am going to shut down the microphone and everybody get back out in the Sunday sun. Thank you.